Bergson and the holographic theory. Today we'll be looking at Hoffman's fusions, Donald Hoffman. We've looked at Hoffman once before, but we'll be looking again. We'll be solving perception, the combination problem, of panpsychism, the origin of space-time, and, well, maybe not. So let's see. Little intro to the intro. I see my book is now on Amazon. So, everyone tell your friends, neighbors, pets, robots, get the book. Unfortunately, it's a little bit expensive because it's an academic publisher, but c'est la vie. Okay, moving on. Donald Hoffman. Donald is ubiquitous on YouTube. Just an example, the mind behind the simulation there. The math behind reality. Everything you see is not real. We are living in a simulation. Thoughts make reality. We live inside a matrix, conscious agency. Nothing you see is real. All with enormous numbers of views. Over there in Lex Friedman, up at the top, 7.1 million views. 539,000 views, 97,000 views, 2.1 million views. Enormous exposure. We've done an analysis earlier, number 38, on Hoff's theory, and there's actually nothing I'd change on it. We're going to be looking at some new things. We also have looked at people he's discussing with, like Philip Goff there, or Yosha Bach, or Michael Levin. But overall, the 1,000 views that, or so that I got on that analysis of Hoff is a fly in the elephant. So I would think it merits a little bit more look. As in my opinion, he represents a kind of a summation of a desperation, in my terms, in the context of the hard problem, the wall everyone's banging their head against, conjoined with problems, what I like to think of as myths in physics. So I think it's worth the time to take yet another look along with some new wrinkles he's introduced. So Hoff we go. I'm going to look at this 2023 article, Fusions of Consciousness. Down there it says 2023. One has to love the first sentence there. It goes like this: consciousness is perplexing, even to expert researchers. There's something about that sentence is amazing. But, okay, but Hoff and his cohorts are going to unperplex us. At a high level, Hoff embraces sort of a fragment of Bergson, I'm going to say. But the overall understanding of the problems, the fundamental intuition, simply insufficient to make good on the implications of the fragment. So the fragment itself isn't truly understood. We'll see the fragment very shortly. Here's a key passage from the article, page 6. Quantum theory and gravity tells us that space-time is doomed. Space-time and objects are not the fundamental reality. Evolution by natural selection agrees, but then it's fundamental. These theories are silent. Our theory of space-time tells us, by the way, I wanted to emphasize that, space-time and objects are not the fundamental reality. So these theories are silent. So our theory of space-time tells us the limits of space-time, but it cannot reveal what lies beyond. Our theory of evolution tells us that our sensory systems, which show us objects in space and time, are not a window on truth. They are a user interface. However, an interface to what? What reality lies beyond our space-time interface? Evolution cannot say. So we must take a leap. We must propose a reality beyond space-time. That's going to be an interesting theme. The quest for the reality beyond space-time is precisely the fork in the road where Hoff and Bergson will part ways. How did Hoff get to space-time and its objects are doomed? Two lines of thought. The first and primary revolves around evolution. Our perception is only oriented to action, not truth. We identify objects only to survive, to eat, avoid danger. So objects have no reality. And secondly, physics, particularly the Planck scale, implication of quantum mechanics. Beyond the 10 to the minus 33rd centimeters, we cannot probe, measure, have no clue on reality. So this second point on physics, it would just take too much discussion for this video on physics and your interpretation of what's actually going on there. I think the arguments that he bases off physics are a bit questionable as to their true implications, especially given the nature of physics at this point. But the perception point is the common ground, the start of the shared fragment. For Hoff, objects are unreal because they are nothing more than icons, like icons on a desktop. That's his metaphor. Icons needed for our survival. They exist purely as a function of the evolutionary tuning of our perceptual systems. Objects in the space-time framework in which they exist are just fiction of this evolution-created perceptual interface. We see the fork because we need a tool. We see the apple because it's something to eat. The tree, something to maybe climb it for a squirrel. Thus, space-time and its objects are unreal. We need to discover the real space-time. Spoiler, Hoff's real space-time is going to be purely mathematical. For Bergson, there is also this interface aspect. But Bergson already begins with the vision of the reality with which we are interfacing. The reality. I apologize for going through it again, but for any Hoff devotees that are watching, this is important. So the universal field for Bergson is a holographic field, indivisibly transforming. Temporally, it is transforming indivisibly. The transformation cannot be described as a series of instants or states. The transformation is like a melody, each instant permeating the next. The state of each instant, quote unquote, reflecting the history of the chains. So the notes of a melody can be taken as the instants. Spatially, it is not a continuum of points or positions. Rather, it is a concrete extensity. As such, real concrete extensity. The points, positions, that coordinate system, ultimately 3 dimensions, is an abstraction. So in this field, this spatial temporal field, holographic field transforming indivisibly, objects do not have the precise orders, or outlines, or borders our perception gives them. The task of the body and its perception in this ever-transforming field is, 1, the body must identify objects upon which it can act. A baby bottle, a mom, a rattle. So our initial perceptual partition of this field is into objects and their motions. This is ultimately rarefied via cognitive development. We end with the abstract space and time of the classic metaphysic, a 3D continuum of points, positions, and the 4th dimension, time, in effect, the series of instants or instantaneous spaces. So yes, space-time, the abstract version, is now our interface, our conceptual projection upon the world. We see the cup moving from point to point, or from position A to position B there, as creating a trajectory, a series of points. Each point corresponds to an instant of time, and that instant of time, in fact, corresponds to a state of the entire universe. Our cubes there is the universe. This is projected upon the dynamically transforming field. This is the lens through which we see it. So yes, abstract space or space-time is indeed unreal. Not only is the continuum of points unreal and the series of instants unreal, but its objects and their motions are rather changes or transfers of state within the global motion of the whole. A global motion, by the way, in which there must be true simultaneity, that is, the relativity of instance and time in this global motion is purely a function of that abstract space in the first place. This holographic field, indivisibly transforming, carries the fundamental attributes of consciousness, a primary elementary memory. This is due to the indivisible transformation, each instant permeating the next. Each present instant is not instantaneously falling into the non-existence of the past. And then an elementary awareness via its holographic nature, the state of each point in this field reflects that of all other points. It is an elementary awareness, is defined throughout. Note, this web of awareness / memory is defined throughout the field as not tied to particles. Important point in things to come. This holographic, indivisibly transforming field, which is beyond space-time, for the abstract classical space-time, the classic metaphysic, is only a conceptual derivative from this holographic reality, which our perception initially confronts to create objects and their motions and then rarefy it to the abstract space. This holographic, indivisibly transforming field, this is completely absent from Hoff's thought. For Hoff, space-time is exactly the equivalent of the abstract space of the classic metaphysic. His time, quote unquote, we'll see, is exactly the series of discrete instants, the fourth dimension of the abstract space. He cannot conceive of the reality described by Bergson's temporal metaphysic, with its holographic nature, with its duration and extensity. So to what does Hoff move? So he says, an interface? To what? Both physics and evolutionary theory are silent. We propose in section 4 that conscious agents are fundamental. Some agents interact with others via an interface, whose format is spacetime and objects located in spacetime. We offer a precise definition of a conscious agent. When agents interact, what happens? We demonstrate in section 5 that they can combine into a complex agent or fuse into a simpler agent with a novel conscious experience. So he's going to the vision of an interacting mass of conscious agents. This is reality, a mass of conscious agents, where the conscious agents, by the way, are fused with experiences. That is, it's difficult to define what is an agent and what's an experience in this case. It's a little vague to me, but they can combine, so you could have complex experiences or simple experiences combined into more complex experiences, accounting for, like he says, a novel conscious experience, etc. So that's his way he's going to explain coffee stirring. That coffee stirring could be a whole set of simple experiences fused into a complex experience. So somehow we're going to explain that, in other words, the qualitative image of the external world, the coffee cup and stirring spoon, and I'm going to note all this is happening on a scale of time. A buzzing fly going by that cup of our normal scale, as opposed to the fly barely flapping his wings like a heron. Scale of time, something Hoff never considers. Now, agents and experiences are now primitives in this scheme of Hoff, beyond matter, space, and time. Now, this now seems to be a trend. Tononi, I think, has implications like this. Castro, perhaps. I won't have to go back and look at this lens through them. But this is Christoph Koch, December 2023. To quote him, when I see blue, or again, in our context here, or coffee stirring for that matter, it is so radically different from the state my brain is in. These are two fundamentally different things. On the one hand, you see neurons firing, synapses, and you've got the physics. On the other hand, you have this conscious experience. In other words, we're just talking the hard problem here. I think that consciousness cannot be explained only in the standard framework of space, time, energy, and matter. We need to posit something additional, experience. So you see, now experience is becoming a primitive, along with space, time, and matter. And Hoff is already leading the way here. How is Bergson going to explain the coffee cup and fly buzzing by, that is, buzzing by their normal scale of time? He's going to use that other reality of which Hoff cannot conceive, a holographic field, indivisibly transforming. He will envision the brain as forming a modulated reconstructive wave, passing through this holographic field. The hologram, as the wave is passing through the hologram plate in the upper corner there, and now specific to a source within the field, that is the cup, the image of the cup, the source of the original object wave going to the eye of the observer. By this process, now an image of the source. So the cup is right where it says it is, external within the field, but it's specific to a past transformation of the field. It has to be, for the field transforms indivisibly. It has a primary memory. So the field is not disappearing. The past of the field is not disappearing instant by instant, as each instant falls into the past. So the wave can be specific to a past event within the field. And via the chemical dynamics of the brain, specifying a scale of time, a buzzing fly of our normal scale. At higher chemical velocities, a heron-like fly. Both those flies reflecting possible action, because the aspect of the holographic field that's being picked out is relative to the actions, possible action of the body. So the image of the cup is an aspect of the holographic field. It is not the cup in itself, in all its reality, with all its relationships to the field or within its own self. Hence it is, as per Hoff, an icon, a symbol of the full reality of the cup. So again, we're back to the fragment that Hoff represents, but way differently than Bergson. His conception is not open to Hoff. He's in the classic metaphysics and stays there. He's going to invoke a structure of conscious agents. These will create space-time, and they will create experience. The swirling coffee, the circling spoon. They will do this creation by projection. To quote, so we must take the leap. We must propose some reality beyond space-time. We must then propose precisely how this deeper reality maps onto space-time. So, as with Susskind, as we talked about in number 39, there will be no physical process doing the projecting, no reconstructive wave, no flashlight. So in the little diagram they're looking at there, there'd be a flashlight projecting through a holographic film, making the clown appear. But Suss says there is no flashlight. We'll see in a second. Or in the original metaphor, there was a 2D holographic surface from which there was projected the virtual world. But then again, you needed some sort of source to project through that, a light wave, a laser wave, through that 2D surface to create the world. But Susskind says, there's no magic flashlight. It's all mathematical. That is, there's no ontology here. This abstract projection, this problem will be present throughout Hoffman's thought, same as Suskind's. It's all mathematical. There's no physical reality, no physical ontology. And what are conscious agents? We start with two posits about consciousness. There are conscious experiences, and there are probabilistic relations among conscious experiences. This leads us to the notion of a conscious agent. One posits for the notion of conscious agents mirror Leibniz's posits for the notion of a simple substance. We'll go back to that a bit. But one asks, how is this not assuming everything you have to explain? You're simply assuming experiences and probabilistic relations among conscious experiences. So we've simply assumed the experience of coffee stirring, or at least the experience components that we're going to fuse together to make coffee stirring. Note Hoff is modeling off Leibniz. Leibniz believed that any monad perceptually mirrors the whole universe. We slightly adapt Leibniz's view here by introducing actions an agent could take on the world. In turn, the world could perceive the agent analogously as the agent perceives its world. Now, Bergson took a different lesson from Leibniz. This is Bergson's statement on the holographic nature of the matter field. Remember, it is not obvious. Is it not obvious that the photograph there be is already taken, already developed in the very heart of things at all points in space? No metaphysics, no physics can escape this conclusion. And he goes down. Ultimately, noting Faraday's lines of force. The lines of force within every direction, from every center, bring to bear upon the whole, upon each, the whole of the material world, the influence of the whole material world. Call up the Leibnizian monads. Each is the mirror of the universe. So he saw Leibniz in terms of the holographic framework of the universe. Again, that different reality. Hoff lays out his scheme of agents, however. Initially, he says it's shown in figure 1, so that's the figure there. A conscious agent has a set of possible experiences, and it has a set of possible actions. It is embedded in a world which we assume to be a network of conscious agents, the thesis of conscious realism. Based on its current experience, the conscious agent decides what action to take. So I would note, first of all, this is just the perception action cycle. You experience something, you act on something. That the world is the network up there, and then there's an experience. Something changes, you decide to act again. So, continuing the quote, it then acts to affect the experiences of conscious agents in the network. It then perceives a new experience influenced by the network. So, a set of possible experiences. And again, I know that could be the world, the coffee cup, right there. We're perceiving it, acting on it, experiencing it, acting again. So he's going to formalize this math-wise via Markov chain dynamics. So I talked about this in number 38 too. The problems here kind of boggle. Is there a principled method for defining experiences? Is there not an infinite list or infinite set of experiences? What does n equal in your mathematical framework? If it's infinite, how does that work? Is coffee stirring a primitive? Likely no. There's other parts to coffee stirring. What are the component experiences of coffee stirring? Well, note, he says, when agents interact, what happens, we demonstrate in section 5, that they can combine into a complex agent or fuse into a simpler agent with novel conscious experience. If n agents interact, their possible combinations form an n times n minus 1 dimensional prototype with n to the n in vertices. Again, notice his n isn't infinite. But one wonders, how can you not allow for the fact that experiences could be infinite? So the components would fuse in the coffee stirring. Well, what are the components? That goes back to what's the principled method of defining components? A cup, a table, my little brown blotch there is the coffee surface, goes in the cup, the spoon, the hand, a patch of yellow, a patch of red. And then don't forget my ever-present invariant structure. How does Hoff's formalism going to map all these little component experiences into that structure, that dynamic structure of flow fields, adiabatic ratios, etc.? Interesting. Are you going to need primitives for every scale of time? Remember, there could be a buzzing fly going by that coffee, which would be a new experience. But then it could be a heron-like fly. And if it was a heron-like fly, the whole stirring would be slowed down. The hand would be moving more slowly, etc. So you have to have a primitive for every scale of time? Experience primitive? Can this account for perception as virtual action? That is, where you're seeing how you can act on that fly? No, that's not accounted for. But we want to go to his new wrinkle. Remember, this deeper reality of conscious agents is supposed to create space-time and the events in space-time, the physics events in space-time. We must then propose precisely how this deeper reality maps onto space-time. Additionally, we must show that this deeper reality looks like quantum field theory and evolution by natural selection when it is projected onto space-time. Again, the word projection means we're just going to have a mathematical mapping. Hoff keys on the amplituhedron, a geometric form that is now used to describe the result of particle scattering experiments in physics. So this geometric form, this amplituhedron, describes these very complex particle scattering results, cuts through a very difficult mathematical process without the geometrics, and is proven very powerful in describing the results. Note that you'd be asking the amplituhedron to actually be driving the results rather than creating the results, rather than describing the results. And that's where some of the confusion is going again. The amplitude of a particular scattering process is obtained by computing the volume of its corresponding amplituhedron. The amplituhedra for various scattering processes are faces of the infinite dimensional master amplituhedron. So all the different scattering results can be mapped onto faces of this master amplituhedron. The amplituhedron derives from a type of vector space, a Grassmannian. Remarkably, the invariant physical content of the positive Grassmannian is combinatorial, described by decorated permutations. Now, this mathematics is getting impressive and complex enough, but at least the permutations, the decorated permutations, are not too difficult. If we have 1, 2, 3, the various permutations, 2, 1, 3, 3, 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, and 1, 2, 3 again. 1, 2, 3 is decorated because if we take 1, 2, 3, move the 1 around back to its original position, that's a permutation of 1, 2, 3, but a decorated permutation of 1, 2, 3. So this will all play in. So into the description of using this form. These two insights give a clear target for the theory of conscious agents. Its Markov chain dynamics must map to decorated permutations and spins. So his conscious agents with its Markov chain dynamics is going to be generative of these decorated permutations and spins. With that map, we can propose a precise correspondence between the Markov polytopes that describe all possible agent dynamics, and secondly, the on-shell diagrams that generate scattering amplitudes. The on-shell diagrams is just another geometric device, heuristic for representing these scattering results. So that's what that's about. So the higher reality that he envisions of conscious agents with their sets of experiences, which are also sitting up there in the higher reality, and their Markov dynamics will project, again, that word, to the higher reality of the amplituhedron to project space-time. So we're going to have the mess in the cloud there, sort of the Platonic cloud. It's going to project to the amplituhedron, which is itself a Platonic form, shall we say, in the cloud, in the Platonic cloud, which will in turn project to events in space-time. It will describe scattering events. But those green arrows are mathematical mappings. And that's what's got to be held in mind. That's what's really going on. Mathematical mappings. This is not the dynamics of the AC motor. This is a geometric form explaining the scattering, as though a Platonic form guides the physical process. Hence, perhaps, where Hoff says there is no dynamics here. That is, he understands intuitively that the amplituhedron is not providing dynamics like an AC motor, real physical forces, physical explanation for the scattering effects. However, he is going to provide the dynamics via his agents. How does a Platonic form inform a physical process such as scattering? How does that work? This is still a mathematical description only. Again, quoting Hoff, physical scattering events are then explained in terms of particles, quote unquote, in space-time, which he doesn't like. So these ideas suggest the conjecture that this procession or projection, that word again, from at least some of the cells of his Markovian polytype, M sumid, have meaning as particle interactions in physics. If so, let us call such projections physical. No, now we're defining by definition the physical. That is, we're creating a definition of the physical. That is, we conjecture an agent-particle correspondence. A particle in space-time is an aspect of a physical projection of the dynamics of a communicating class of conscious agents. What is that communication? Interesting. To a face of an amplituhedron. So again, the dynamics here that he's now going to provide, quote unquote, is still just more math. We're going to be projecting his Markovian prototype aspects thereof onto the amplituhedron. Of what ill is Platonic form symptomatic? The denial of the reality of time. In regards to the Greeks, Bergson said, creative evolution, rather than lay the blame on the attitude of thought and language toward the course of things, that is, to the natural progression unfolding of events in time, our experience of coffee stirring, they preferred to pronounce the course of things itself to be wrong. The Greek idea, eidos, in this context is best translated as view or moment. It is the stable view of a change, the form, an instant of evolution or moment. To reduce things to ideas is therefore to reduce becoming into its principal moments, each of these being, moreover, screened from the laws of time and, as it were, plucked out of eternity. If we start from immutable ideas, there is yet becoming. If I've got an immutable idea of my guy there, we yet have to get the guy to grow, to evolve. So to derive becoming, we get there by diminution. We degrade the immutable ideas into becoming, change. So he grows from baby to teenager to an adult. At the base of ancient philosophy is this postulate. There is more in the motionless than in the moving. Thus, the ideas or forms are the whole of intelligible reality. They represent altogether the theoretical equilibrium of being. So we have all of those forms, dinosaurs, squirrels, etc., are somehow in a Platonic world. Being becomes one vast idea at a single moment, eternity. So the modern advance on the Greeks that was to move from certain privileged moments, as there, we take certain privileged moments of the growth of or the transformation of the man, to looking at every single instant of the motion. We're moving that cup from across that plane. We look at it instant by instant. Or letting an object fall down an inclined plane with Galileo, we look at the object's trajectory instant by instant. But nevertheless, we're looking at static pictures, static moments in a dynamic growth, in an indivisible motion. So Hoff's time is still reflective of the Greeks. Thus, the theory of conscious agents may find that entropic time is not fundamental, not a fundamental feature of reality, but merely an artifact of projection to explain the error of time, as an emergent property of entropic systems is not a new idea, or in contrast to most approaches, we do not assume that our experience of an era of time somehow mirrors physical evolution. In fact, evolution by natural selection tells us this is most unlikely to happen, but that it arises as projection of a dynamics of consciousness that underlies physical evolution. But its projection is necessarily, by the very nature of mathematics and its metaphysic, the class of metaphysic, the abstract space, are only a series of discrete states. The movement slips through the interval, says Bergson, because every attempt to reconstitute change out of states implies the absurd proposition that movement is made of immobilities. Gotta let that sink in, the absurdity of this notion. Hoff cannot explain our perception, our experience of the continuous motion of the stirring of the coffee. He can only project states, one, then the next, then the next. There can never be more than one state in his consciousness, in experience, perception. Hoff thinks that all panpsychic theories are either tied to the concept of particles, which are for him fictions, or at minimum to space-time, also a fiction. Thus, they are wrong. But let's look at what Bergson says. But the materiality of the atom dissolves more and more under the eyes of the physicist. We have no reason, for instance, for representing the atom to ourselves as a solid rather than as a liquid or gaseous, nor for picturing the reciprocal action of atoms by shocks rather than in any other way. Why do you think of a solid atom and why of shocks? Because solids, being the bodies in which we clearly have the most hold, are those which interest us most in our relations with the external world. Goes on. Something then exists between the atoms. Remember, we're talking particles here. It will be said that this something is no longer matter, but force, and we should be asked to picture to ourselves stretched between the atoms threads, which will be made more and more tenuous until they are invisible, even, we are told, immaterial. Shades of Hoff, immaterial. But what purpose can this crude image serve? And indeed, we see force and matter drawing nearer together the more deeply the physicist has penetrated into their effects. We see force more materialized, the atom more and more idealized, the two terms converging toward a common limit, and the universe thus recovering its continuity. So, again, the different vision of reality. Now, Hoff's fusion model, fusing all those experience elements and agents of a coffee stirring event into a unified experience, or combining, I'm not sure which, with all the model's mathematics, it is his route to solving the combination problem of panpsychism. It is how multiple conscious particles go together to make coffee stirring, the unified perception of coffee stirring. He is apparently unaware of Bergson's model, which starts in its panpsychic model. Remember that holographic field is basically a panpsychic field, elementary awareness defined across. That model which starts in the relatively, I think, easy to understand reality behind Hoff's spacetime / classic metaphysics. That is, again, Hoff's spacetime is the classic metaphysics of spacetime. And it has no combination problem, Bergson's model, because as a reconstructive wave, that wave is specifying or specific to the coffee stirring, the event of coffee stirring within the field, as a source within the field. We're not combining anything. So this I find remarkable. I sense Bergson, with his holographic field, brain as a reconstructive wave, scales of time, considers too far out. Yet Hoff makes Bergson look, well, tame, prosaic, pedestrian. The world seems ever more strange. So next we'll see. Till then, signing off.